Welcome to Snack Time Chats, a collection of short, podcast-style recordings designed to promote best practice and encourage knowledge exchange throughout the ELC sector. Each session will be led by the Improvement Service, who will be joined by a different guest speaker for each recording. In August 2021, the statutory entitlement to funded early learning and childcare provision in Scotland increased. Around 90,000 children, all 3 and 4 year olds, as well as 2-year-olds who need it most, will now be able to benefit from 1,140 hours of free early learning and childcare per year. The expansion will be transformative for families and is a cornerstone in helping every child to fulfil their potential and help close the poverty-related attainment gap, as well as supporting parents and carers into work, study or training. For our first Snack Time chat, I am joined by Adam Hall, the team lead for the ELC expansion programme at Improvement Service, who will talk in more detail about the role of the IS in the expansion, how the team has evolved and how the work of what is quite a small team has had some real positive impacts on local authorities and the families they serve.
Yeah, thanks, Emma, and hello to everyone who's listening. So as Emma says, my name's Adam Hall. I'm the team lead for the ELC Programme and Improvement Service. I've been on this programme for coming up to 3 years now. I joined back beginning of 2019. At that stage as a business analyst. So the Improvement Service actually was involved in the expansion before I even started. Through virtue at that point of our change management team. So it was recognised obviously that this huge transformation and change project that was taking place in councils may benefit from support of the Improvement Service's change management function, who are well set up for helping councils and talking them through the sort of the necessary steps when approaching any sort of change or transformation project. The initial function that was being served was of a business analyst, working as part of the change management team, and they were in place to support councils in the delivery of the expansion through initially the scope was through skills transfer, providing training and tools and techniques for business planning, to deploy a range of business analysis techniques, including process mapping and service and cost modelling, supply and demand analysis, business case development, all that sort of nuts and bolts business analysis work that the change management team are well set up to do. Alongside that, we were also the request was also that we collect delivery progress data to understand the trajectory of the delivery of the expansion in local authorities. And so since September 2018, we've been periodically collecting data on the progress of delivery of the expansion from local authorities.
Now, these delivery progress reports, Adam, served dual purpose, didn't they?
So that really did help to inform where support could be offered and where there was obvious good practice going on that we could learn from it and share. And that's really been a cornerstone of our involvement in the expansion throughout. So periodically, initially every 6 months, and then moving to every term through COVID, we've been collecting the delivery progress data and analysing that, identifying where we can learn from what's going on in the sector and where we can identify where there's support that might be needed. As with anything, when we look across 32 local authorities, there's variability at a local level with the extent to which the delivery was advanced at any given time throughout the expansion since 2018. So off the back of that, we were there and sort of developed our offer. We brought on there was obviously myself plus another business analyst at that stage, and latterly followed by bringing in a workforce advisor alongside our communications function, which is now served obviously fantastically by Emma. And through that team was then taken out of sort of the individual change management team or knowledge management team in improvement service and brought together into the single early learning childcare program as it is right now.
So what impact did that have in moving away from the change management team and the functionality of that team to becoming essentially a team in itself, a standalone team focused purely on the expansion programme?
And that really enabled us to better direct our support and really have a team offer. So throughout we've tried to take the most holistic approach possible, understanding the true context at the local level of the challenges and the successes that have been discovered throughout expansion between local authorities. We sort of pride ourselves on being able to get into the nuts and bolts with local authorities, understand what is going on locally, what are their specific challenges, and really help them to address those challenges in an appropriate way. That includes, things like being critical friend against program plans, looking at detailed supply and demand analysis by capturing case studies of down to individual settings where there's real good practice going on in terms of how the expansion was delivered and latterly through response to COVID. I suppose I could come on and talk about how COVID changed our team and how it sort of changed the response that we had, I suppose.
Yeah, that would be great, Adam. That was actually going to be my next question. So I suppose it would also be good to understand the wider impact that COVID had on this, not just the impact it had on our immediate team.
Obviously, the expansion was initially due to be brought into force in August of 2020. But in light of the pandemic, the statutory duty on local authorities was paused in April 2020. So that was not going to come into force in August 2020. And that really was in response to the fact that alongside the business change that was required to deliver the expansion, there was necessarily a huge amount of recruitment being undertaken and infrastructure development, building sites all closed, obviously, as part of the lockdown, and that meant that physical capacity, as well as the sort of operational capacity provided by the workforce, couldn't be developed and put in place at the same rate due to the lockdown due to COVID-19. So with that statutory duty removed, the focus was obviously moving away from delivery of the expansion at that stage, and it really was about how could our team support local authorities in understanding the response required and what was needed in terms of the early learning childcare sector throughout COVID-19. The early learning childcare sector was in a fairly, not unique, but a rare position where there were still the early learning childcare settings were always open throughout lockdown to provide childcare for key worker, to provide a critical childcare and provision for key workers throughout that first lockdown. And it was something that we were constantly reflecting on, was that at the time when the rest of society was being told to obviously keep the distance from one another and stay at home, the members of staff working in early learning childcare, not only were they still working, but they work with small children. It was reflected that it wasn't appropriate to try and keep distance between practitioners and the children they were looking after. So there really was a juxtaposition there of what was being asked of the early learning childcare workforce compared to the wider society. And I think it's such a testament to them that that was able to carry on in that way. In support of that, what we try to do is be a link between local authorities that we've built relationships with over the previous couple of years to the Scottish Government, in helping them to understand exactly what public health measures were, what they all meant, what the guidance meant. Guidance changed at a few points throughout the lockdowns, and you know, through over the last 18 months, the public health guidance has necessarily had to change to adapt to the change in public health advice. And as with everything, there are always sort of frequently asked questions that come up in terms of how this guidance is actually implemented on the ground, and our team, moving away from our sort of specific roles of business analyst and communications and workforce to really be sort of a point of contact for local authorities to be able to ask these questions. And we would gather feedback from colleagues in Scottish Government to make sure that the public health measures were being implemented in a way that was seemed appropriate. That was obviously quite challenging and moved us away from the core work of the expansion, but we felt we were really pleased to be able to be of any help to the sector in that role. As things started to open up over the summer and early learning childcare sector had a wider reopening come August of 2020, the attention of the team again was turned back and was thinking about when would it be appropriate to restart that statutory duty to deliver the 1140 expansion. Now, it should be noted at this point that even at that stage, upon the reopening in August 2020, a large number of local authorities were able to deliver 1140 at that stage to all the eligible families, which is a huge achievement, and reflects on, again, the differences between local authorities are differences that had been seen throughout the expansion. Not every local authority was moving at exactly the same pace, and obviously therefore COVID-19 impacted different local authorities in different ways in terms of their ability to put the expansion in sooner, or necessarily require more buildings to be finished or more workforce. So some local authorities were able to deliver on 1140 in August 2020, and the whole sector recognised that with the huge benefits that the expansion was going to offer to children and families, that there was a real imperative to say how soon can we crack on and deliver this expansion that we've all been working towards for so many years. So at that stage, we, building on the relationships that we built prior to and during our response to COVID-19, we were able to have some really, again, understand the local context of the early learning childcare sector in local authorities, and we're able to use that to pass that understanding on to show the ability of local authorities to respond in the sector, and also the specific challenges that might be faced, so that when the statutory duty was reset and was confirmed as being in August 2021, we were able to provide assurance that was an appropriate date. It was as soon as was feasible, without putting undue pressure on local authorities, but at the same time bringing in the duty at the earliest possible time, so that the children and families could benefit from that. And that was an assessment that was made, obviously not just by us, it was by the wider delivery assurance team from Scottish Government, of which we are a part. That includes support from the Scottish Futures Trust on infrastructure, and obviously colleagues from Scottish Government as well. So with the statutory duty date set back at August 2021, we almost, not entirely, but reverted back to our sort of substantive position of how do we best support local authorities in the delivery of the expansion beyond that. So that was where we started our work again. So again, as I say, COVID-19 hit different local authorities in very different ways, depending on the reliance on infrastructure development or the reliance on the workforce expansion, and so that left us with different challenges across the country and different success stories to be able to learn from, and that was where our attention turned next. It was to make sure that, again, we were in the position of being there to support local authorities to deliver the expansion come the new sort of go live date of August 2021. Yeah, I think beyond that, the main thing to say is that we all local authorities did deliver in August 2021. It was, I think this enormous social infrastructure change program that was, by and large, a big chunk of the portion of the delivery of this program had taken place throughout the pandemic. And I think it's a huge testament to the work of local authorities and the partnership working with Scottish Government that despite those challenges, that commitment and that expansion was delivered in August 2021. So I think big pats on the back all round and definitely cause for celebration. But I think the other thing to think about is then what comes next. Obviously, this has been a huge change for the sector, and anyone who's read through any delivery progress reports recently that we publish will have noted that there's been a huge increase in even just looking at local authority workforce, there's been an 83% increase in the local authority ELC workforce since the beginning of expansion. So I think the delivery in August 2021 of the statutory entitlement is still it's still the start of a journey rather than the end of one. And I think that's where our attentions are turning now. It's about how do we make sure that we can not just for the initial delivery of the expansion, but in terms of making sure that those intended benefits are realised at a local level, and that brings with it again the need for support for local authorities to be able to help them to understand what do we mean by sustainable workforce and how, in the short and long term, how can we help to really bed in the expansion and ensure that those benefits are realised at a local level, so that we can stand up and be proud to say that the early learning childcare that is on offer is not just not just delivering the 1140 hours, but that it is universally high quality and flexible and affordable, and that it is being accessed to the benefit of those children and families that it's there to serve. And that's really where our heads right now is trying to make sure that all of this hard work that's gone into deliver the expansion is continued and is making sure that we are realising those benefits, and that it can so that we can help those children and families access it in a way that feels appropriate to them. Yeah, I think that probably gives a bit of a start to finish rundown of where we came from, beginning the expansion, where the support that we offered throughout, and where we're at now. But yeah, I mean, as always, I'd say to anyone, any questions on the work that we've done, we always welcome engagement, and we're always here to speak and to listen to any questions or comments or any requests for support. We are a flexible team, and we're able to deliver what is necessary for local authorities. So the door is always open to be able to go through and see how we can help to whatever ways that we can help. We're here to do so.
That's great. Thank you very much, Adam. That was a really comprehensive overview, and for a lot of people who will be listening to this and may not fully understand the role of the improvement service throughout this process, so that was a really nice introduction for people who perhaps haven't had the chance to engage with us directly or indirectly, but also just to remind those who we have worked with that there's a lot of work that the improvement service are able to support with, and you mentioned some of the work on workforce and on case studies to capture best practice, and a lot of that information is stored and accessible through the improvement service website. So if anybody would like to know more about workforce planning, for example, there's a really good toolkit that's been developed by Audrey Clark, who's part of the ELC team at Improvement Service, in collaboration with another member of the team, and likewise there's case studies as well. So if there's anything that a local authority or an individual setting feel would be good to be captured and noted down, then you can see some examples of what we've already documented, and if there's anything where you feel you would like that to be recorded, then we're absolutely happy to help with that. So all that I think's left to do from me is to say thank you very much to Adam for joining us today, and thank you very much for listening, everybody.
Thank you for listening. If you have any questions about the topics discussed in this recording, or if you're interested in taking part in the series, please do not hesitate to get in touch. More details and contact information can be found on the Improvement Service website.